Actor and director Ken Olin appeared on the March 12, 1992 episode of Later with Bob Costas. And it was about a year after 30-something had ceased production, and he was ready to look back and talk about it, but what he was more excited about was directing. And so about 30-something years later, everybody's watching This Is Us, which Ken Olin directed about 20 episodes and was involved in the production of. And he talks about the difference between directing and acting in this episode, in transcendence, and knowing that you're on the right path and doing what you're supposed to be doing. Really cool interview. So we're all now 60-something, wishing we were 30-something, watching this interview about 30-something. It was about 30-something years ago today.
Thanks for staying up later. Ken Olin is with us. A TV movie he directed called Doing Time on Maple Drive airs on Fox TV coming up on March the 16th. We'll talk about that in a minute. But like it or not, when you spend a half hour with you got to talk about 30-something. So we might as well start with it.
Okay.
And am I making a mistake to say like it or not? Do you still like it, or is it ambivalent, or what?
It's actually been, I haven't been doing the show now since May, so it's been, almost a year. So I guess there's a little bit of nostalgia, or at least there's no defensiveness anymore about it.
Yeah.
I don't know really, what there is to say about it, what more there is to say about it.
It's almost a standard show business complaint. And that doesn't mean it's not a legitimate complaint, but people say they have success in a television program. It's a certain kind of role.
Right.
They enjoyed it, they appreciate it, but now that's all that people can see, and that bothers people.
I think that part of the thing, part of the problem, I think, for a lot of actors is if you play a certain role and the role has, at least a degree of believability to it, you're usually then associated with that part for the remainder of your career. You have to work very hard to overcome that identification. For me, I don't have a vested interest in that right now because I've been doing so much directing. The nice thing about that for me is that, people like you are willing to have me on your show, which I think if I were only a director, it would be more difficult to promote something that I was doing. Not that I would come on the show just to promote something, because just to spend this time with you is a privilege. But no, so that I'm not really working.
And people have to pretty much state that before they get to be on the show. So that's out of the way.
They don't give you, Diet Coke or anything to drink. You're pretty much on your own. But it's a little hard. I walk down the street still, and people go, "Hey, 30-something." That used to be. I think that was more difficult for me at a time because I was striving to have an identity that was autonomous and at least was relative to my work as an actor, and I wanted that appreciated. Now I can look back at the show and the things that we accomplished and the people that we were working with and feel very proud of it, especially now that it's over.
See you, Mike.
When you do a part for 4 years, I've been saying, I think when somebody came up with the original concept of acting out stories, I don't think that they intended to do the same story or the same person for 4 years of their life. That became, to some extent, drudgery for me. I think partially because I was moving away from a commitment to acting, and partially because the nature of the character, or whatever, a number of different circumstances. Now that I haven't done it for 8 months or 9 months, I can feel proud of it, and I don't experience the same thing. We did some stuff on the show that, it was good. I think it really was good, and I don't think we compromised a lot of the original values that we brought into the show in terms of trying to make some kind of personal filmmaking for television and things that, were important to the people involved. And some of the things that we did about parenting and about a relationship to, I did some things about my father dying in the first year that were very important to me, and we did things about ovarian cancer that were important, and relationships with friends, things like that, that you go, that was special, and that was nice, and certainly it, gave me an opportunity to direct, and, you know, a laboratory to try those things out in, which were great.
What episode or episodes was most personal for you?
You know, we did an episode, actually, that was on the end of the third season, and it was called The Other Shoe, and it was about, it was one of the first shows that dealt with the process of trying to make yourself well when you're dealing with something that's potentially terminal disease like ovarian cancer. And it's an episode in which Patty meets a fellow cancer patient, and this person is consumed with the idea of dying and tries to involve Patty in a way of thinking which is potentially destructive.
Take it right in the middle of our food.
It was a show written by a man named Joe Doherty, and we won the Humanitas Prize for it, which is something it was actually very nifty, and Patty won her first Emmy for lead actress for it. And there were some things in that episode that were probably not only the most personal for Patty, and where she does some of her most, I don't know, extraordinary work in terms of the range, but also it had a quality that was very edgy to me, which I liked as a director. It was, and there was just something very different about that episode, because while the character voices some of the, let's say, socially conscious issues of cancer, she does them in a way which doesn't preclude against a character investigation. And that part in which do you struggle with, do you embrace your death, or do you continue to struggle against it even when, you know, the prospect of dying might seem almost inevitable? You know, this is very long, but anyway, that was my favorite.
Have you pretty much made your own decision that you're going to be a director, and that if you act at all, it's going to be almost incidental from this point on?
Yeah, I've been directing now since the show came down. I did Doing Time on Maple Drive, and The Broken Chord. I'm about to go start, and I'm going to direct a pilot for CBS that Joe Doherty, I was talking about earlier, wrote with Karen Allen starring. And then hopefully this summer I'm going to direct a movie with Patty for ABC called The Fortune Teller. So, and these commitments are actually very long, because between, you know, pre-production and production, post-production, it's 4 or 5 months. So if things keep going well, you know, there won't be time, and I don't really feel any creative desire to act. Acting for me was never as fulfilling or consuming as directing is. I was always very concerned with what was going on in the periphery. I was very critical, I think, at times of directors I was working with. And I think I always felt a lot of pressure being an actor, just uncomfortable pressure to perform. And I think, you know, by nature, distractions are not really very good for actors. I think the best actors are very invested in the moment and very committed to the moment that they're, you know, involved in a given scene. And if you're concerned with where the camera is or how it's moving, or, you know, whatever the staging of a scene, you tend to be probably not as interesting, or as, and it, you know, I just wasn't very fulfilled by it.
Why do you think you weren't fulfilled? Because other things are more interesting, or because you weren't as good as you hoped you would be, or
probably a combination of both. Yeah, I think that when I was good, or when I've actually looked at things that I thought were good, it took an incredible amount of effort, and by and large, I thought that the majority of the time, I never had that experience, which I see like my wife, somebody like Patty Weddick. I watch her work, and I see so often she has an almost transcendent experience in the character. She so understands and is so deeply invested emotionally in the character that she'll have a moment that is completely unpredictable to her, and she takes flight. And I don't think that I experienced that very often as an actor. And if I ever did experience it, it wasn't something that I could sustain. And that comes from either a certain amount of self-consciousness or an analytic sort of personality, as opposed to a more, I guess, spontaneous or emotional personality. And, you know, why, I mean, I don't know why I would then pursue it particularly, except that, you know, it's much more lucrative to act than direct. It's not as lucrative as actually having your own talk show. But it's pretty lucrative.
Obviously, he's derived this information from another source.
But I mean, there's just, I think often actors can have an experience which is, you know, I mean, really wonderfully freeing emotionally. And I have that experience often when I direct, and I didn't have that very often when I acted. You know, I think sometimes, you know, I think sometimes I would make certain adjustments which maybe were a little overly sincere. I know often, like, the character Michael Stedman was often characterized as being, you know, so sensitive, and you know, and that would be hurtful, and I would think, I'm not trying to do that. I'm really not trying to be overly sensitive, and yet I watch it and I realize that some of the ways in which I would be tense or something as an actor, which is a very important and natural problem for actors, is how you overcome tension, would be to make certain adjustments in not so much in terms of physicality, but vocally. And it's a way of softening your voice and appearing more, which, like when I hang out with you, I so obviously don't do. You know, not the least bit sensitive to you. But I watch that now, and it's really, you know, it's disturbing to me. I can hear it, and I can see this sort of way, and I go, well, no wonder people had a problem with that, because there's something valid about that. And it didn't have to do with any sort of conscious decision. It has to do with a way of maybe feeling somewhat less than totally engaged in what you're doing, and I think those kind. I mean,
so it becomes,
makes me very nervous talking about it. Why did I tell you this?
Then it becomes mechanical and self-conscious.
Yeah.
Rather than something that's coming from some place that's more or less true.
I think you should act out of a deep desire to act. It's the same way I think you should direct from that. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, for different reasons, get into directing because there's a lot of control involved, or you think there's going to be a lot of control involved, or whatever, but they don't come because they feel deeply that there's some gift in them that they have to, you know, to contribute, or that they want to explore. There's other concerns, and I think for me with acting, there was a lot of things that I wanted from acting or believed I could contribute to acting that I'm not sure I genuinely had a talent for.
Let's talk about the road to 30-something. You were in a TV series that probably a lot of people don't remember, but I do, simply because it was about baseball.
Oh, Bay City Blues.
Yeah, you played the third baseman. I forget the guy's name.
Rocky Padillo.
Yeah. This was, in my mind, a funny show in a dark sort of way. And I don't know if the audience quite knew how to take this. I mean, the thing about baseball, and I remember one episode where the team mascot was a badly troubled guy.
Right,
and we don't want to think that the Philly Fanatic or the San Diego Chicken has serious psychological problems.
Yeah, he did.
But this team's mascot did.
Yeah, I don't think,
and of course,
you know,
who would get inside a costume like that would be anything other than extremely well adjusted.
Right. Write letters to Bob Costas. All those mascots out there. Look, frankly, I think it's a very healthy job. So, you know, if you want to dress up like a bird. But I don't think very many people thought it was funny, but I don't think very many people watched it. You know, I think there's so many problems with that show. You know, first of all, I mean, you know, you talk about Pete Rose. I mean, Pete Rose was extremely successful at getting a baseball to do what he wanted it to do, and that was maybe, what, 1 out of, 3 times, 1 out of 4 times, let alone getting a bunch of actors from, you know, all over the country to hit the ball where it had to go. I mean, it was just, the production problems were so enormous, and I don't know what it was. Also, you know, honestly, because I'm pretty sure that all the people involved with that show are asleep now, I think that most of the people that were writing that show have an ear for more of an urban sensibility. And I think that show was set in a much more rural kind of environment. And I don't think we ever captured the sound of it. Plus, I don't know how many people were really, you know, ball players. And I also think one of the things that's so beautiful about baseball is that what you love about the game is how slowly and naturally it evolves over 9 innings and 2.5 or 3 hours. But to try to condense that into a, 48 minutes or something was so difficult, because you lose a lot of the poetry of the game. You know, to make it always come down to a 3-2 count, and the base is loaded, and a strikeout or a home run is, I mean, it's just difficult. And then, so that the soap opera aspect of it was never, it wasn't coming off of anything that was, fundamentally compelling, the way that, like, the police drama was on Hill Street. Whenever Hill Street got into trouble, they could cut to a very effective car chase. When we would get in trouble on Bay City Blues, you would cut to a very boring or, bad baseball game, you know, people that would throw like this and stuff. So, you know, it's a little hard to believe these guys are going to be professional baseball players, you know. Come on, let's go in the locker room and flick some towels at each other. But, you know, so that, jeez, listen to me.
Now Hill Street Blues could have been, I guess, a big breakthrough for you, but the role wasn't quite as large as you maybe hoped for, right?
Well, yeah, I think what that was, and I didn't know it at the time, was that I was brought onto Hill Street at a time when people were beginning to renegotiate their contracts, and I was kept there in case something happened. Then when Steven Bochco was replaced, the executive producers felt that if they were going to write for new characters, they may as well create characters on their own and collect, you know, their own royalties. I mean, writers get royalties for every character they create. So this is pretty cool. I go on, you know, all right, what else do you want to know? You want to really know how the contracts work? So they, I think they felt at the time there really wasn't any need for me to be around. It was no great loss. But you know, it was a nice experience, I guess. You know, I got stabbed. That was actually cool. When I got killed, it was very cool. I got sort of gutted in an alley. You know, I was lying there in a puddle, and you know, I'd just done this major death scene. I remember the director going, "All right, that's a wrap," and he walked past me. And nobody said goodbye to me or anything. I just laid out in a puddle, and but, you know, hey, what are they doing now? All right, now.
Suppose you've been shot and killed, or knifed and gutted and killed, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Now the director says cut.
Right.
Do you bounce right back up, or do you stay in character for a while and kind of roll over?
I don't know. You know, I've never been such a. I think one of the shortcomings probably for me as an actor was that I never did become so fully invested in a characterization that, you know, if I had died, I would actually believe I was dead for a few minutes until somebody came along and said, okay.
A couple of projects you've been involved in recently. The Broken Chord, which was on ABC in early February,
right.
With Jimmy Smits playing a guy, a single guy who adopts
father, yeah.
a young child, and the child turns out to be a victim of fetal alcohol syndrome. And then the one that's coming up on Fox TV is spending time or doing time on Maple Drive. Tell me about that.
That's another, you know, lighthearted comedy about a dysfunctional American family, and I'm not sure how much of the plot I should talk about, except that one of the premises was, you know, I think so often when we explore dysfunction, and I think that we've become more reluctant in this country to explore dysfunction or acknowledge dysfunction in the society, we situate it in circumstances that are a little bit distant and alien from the norm, the normal middle class, church-going, fairly conservative American family. One of the premises that Paul Lussier, who's the executive producer, and James Duff, the writer, I think one of the things that they wanted to investigate was, what about if you put certain types, I mean, certain people who, let's say, are, I don't know, ostracized or criticized or there's prejudice against in a society, what about, certainly they would be by the members of this family who are fairly conservative Protestants. What if you put them in your own family, and what then becomes more important? Keeping the family together, which is, you know, obviously a very important value in our society, you know, maintaining the family, or do you kick them out because they are considered immoral, or at least they don't represent the values that you've tried to bring them up with? And so, you know, that's something that we explore.
Time on Maple Drive, directed by Ken Olin, is coming up on Fox TV on March the 16th. We're out of time. Thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Thanks.
See you later.